dismember it and put the pieces on the firewood, but without setting it on fire. I will prepare the other ox and put it on the wood, but I will not set it on fire either. 24 Then they will call on the name of their God, and I will call on the name of the Lord. He who responds with fire, that is the true God. And all the people agreed. This was a very brave challenge. Israel was plagued by prophets of the pagan god Baal. The people followed the god Baal. Elijah was apparently alone, and the test was precisely that the God who first sent fire from heaven to consume the sacrifices would be the true God. Let us remember that Baal was the god of the storm, of thunder, of the fire that comes from the sky. So, this should be a piece of cake for him. Baal had 400 prophets against a single prophet of the God of Israel. This was not an equal contest. Still, they agreed to accept the challenge posed by Elias. The turn was first for the Baal worshippers. The prophets of Baal took the ox that was given to them and prepared it, and called on the name of their God from morning until noon. Baal, answer us, they shouted, while jumping around the altar they had made. But they found no answer. They then began to scream louder and, as was their custom, they cut themselves with knives and daggers until they were covered in blood. Noon passed, and they continued in this prophetic trance until the afternoon. But the supposed god of thunder, of fire from heaven, could do nothing. Then came the turn of the solitary prophet Elijah. Elijah built an altar with 12 stones, representing the 12 tribes of Israel, a very powerful message for the people to remember their origins and their identity as God's people. Then he had a deep trench dug around the altar. He placed the 539 pieces of the good one on the altar and asked that 4 jars of water be poured over it, which was repeated 2 more times, so that everything was completely wet. Then in 1 Kings 18:36-37 he said, at the time of the evening sacrifice, the prophet Elijah stepped forward and prayed like this: Lord, God of Abraham, Isaac, and Israel, let everyone know today that you are God in Israel, and that I am your servant and have done all this in obedience to your word. Answer me, Lord, answer me, so that these people recognize that you, Lord, are God, and that you are turning their hearts to you. What a beautiful prayer and request. God once again in his grace showing himself to his rebellious, idolatrous and unbelieving people, showing his mercy by giving indubitable proof of his presence and grace towards his people, calling them back to himself. That is our great covenant God. At that moment the fire of the Lord fell and burned the burnt offering, the wood, the stones and the ground, and even licked the water from the ditch. When they saw this, they all fell down and exclaimed, The Lord is God! The Lord is God! What an emotional moment. Baal, the god of thunder, had proven to be a fraud. The supposed God to whom they had given their lives had proven to be a simple piece of stone that was of no use. There is only one living and true God, and that day they recognized who he was. The Lord is God. The Lord is the only living and true God. How easily we can exchange the living and true God for false gods. How easy it is to trust our lives to temporary, fragile and limited things, instead of trusting in him who is the rock of the ages. That day the people were able to recognize who God truly was. That was a very high day for the prophet Elijah. It was one of those mountain-top experiences. A solitary prophet, but he came from the great God of the covenant, the God of Israel, the living and true God. As part of that judgment on idolaters, Elijah slaughtered the 400 prophets of Baal to eradicate the worship of this false god in Israel. My brothers, in those moments at the top of the mountain, in our highest moments, those of greatest strength, of greatest power, we depend on our great God of the covenant. This whole history teaches us that Elijah was a clay vessel. That day on Mount Carmel it was not the power of the prophet that was manifested, but it was the power of the living and true God on whom the prophet depended. If right now you are experiencing one of those highest points in your life, if you are being prosperous, if you are in a moment in which you experience advances, power, blessing in your life, do not forget that you and I are clay vessels. We are not there because we are very sagacious, intelligent, industrious, but we are at that point because our great Lord of the covenant, merciful, supports us, always calling us from our idols to his truth, always with his grace. 540. Holding us upright. At all times we depend on our covenant Lord. In our highest moments, we depend on our covenant Lord. After this great and memorable event, Elijah separated from Ahab. 1 Kings 19, 1-3 tells us what happened. Next, Ahab told Jezebel everything Elijah had done and how he had killed all the prophets with the edge of the sword. Then Jezebel sent a messenger to Elijah to say, May the gods punish me mercilessly if I have not taken your life by this time tomorrow as you took theirs. Elijah was scared and fled to safety. How interesting. Elijah, the one who had faced his bitter enemy Ahab, the one who had boldly confronted and slaughtered 400 men, the one who had gone against the majority religion at that time, the one who saw fire fall from heaven, trembled and fled before the threat of Jezebel. We may find it difficult to understand this. We have just left a powerful, confident, brave Elias. And now we find a weak Elias, fleeing in terror and very upset by the threat of a powerful woman. Yes, of course, but he had just witnessed what power truly is. Look at what Elijah says in 1 Kings 19:3-4. When he arrived at Beersheba in Judah, he left his servant there and walked a whole day in the desert. He came to where there was a bush, and he sat in the shade of it wanting to die. I'm fed up, Lord. He protested. Take my life, for I am no better than my ancestors. Here is the great prophet Elijah at his lowest moment, having experienced the mountain top. Now he was in the lowest dark valley of his existence. Take my life. This is fed up. This Elias, as we see, is a glass of clay. Just like you and me. In those low moments, what did Elias need? What could sustain Elijah? No, the same thing he held when he was on the top of the mountain. Because there is no difference. At all times we depend on our great covenant Lord. In our highest moments we depend on the Lord, but also in our lowest moments we depend on the great God of the covenant. And that is precisely what happened. Elijah is taken to Mount Horeb, which is Mount Sinai itself, do you remember? Where Moses had his encounter with God. In the burning bush. Both Elijah and Moses had their meeting on that same mountain. And there on Mount Horeb God confirms to Elijah his presence and his protection. He tells him that he was wrong to think that he was alone because God had 7,000 Israelites who had not bowed the knee to Baal. And basically he tells him that 541. His mission is not over, that he should get up and go to